Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm Donald Grodoff, family coach with FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com. In the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast series, I delve into the hidden characteristics of OCD, anxiety, and anxiety disorders. The things that most people don't see, that are behind closed doors and shut within the mind about anxiety. My goal with these podcasts is to bring about awareness of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Understand that I am not a doctor, therapist, or counselor, and the content, information, resources, and ideas that are talked about and brought up here in these podcasts are things that I have used, discovered, or have been recommended to me, and I always recommend to seek additional professional help in finding solutions for yourself. Thank you for listening and enjoy the podcast. This podcast was recorded February 19, 2018. And this podcast is podcast 17 called Climbing the Ladder of Mind Change. In the last podcast, number 16, we talked about circuit tapping, a tool you can use to help relieve anxiety, relieve stress. And in this podcast, what I want to talk about is one of the problems that I run into or see as an issue for many of the clients that come into me, especially the older clients, the ones that are a little older in age. They'll come in to my office with some pretty heavy anxiety issues, and many times they've been in these issues for a long time, whether it be PTSD, whether it be OCD, whatever the anxiety issue is. They, a lot of times, have been dealing with this since their childhood, and it may have started because of their childhood. What I talk about in one of my previous podcasts about the sponge years, when they took it in and it became the rule of life, so they've lived with it for a long time. And they come into my session, first off, believing they should be further along than this. At this age, I should be financially better, or at this age, I should be in a better situation in my life. Maybe they've been divorced and they don't feel like they should have been divorced. That they started out wanting to have this perfect marriage that didn't last. A lot of it's financial, and so if they're not where they should be, then they feel like they have done something wrong, or there's something wrong with them. And, part of this thinking is that, they have been in this anxiety for a long time. And so they want to turn it around in an hour, or they want to turn it around in a couple of days, or even a week, when they've been in it for, 10, 20, 30 years. It just doesn't happen like that. And I'm going to talk about that, the ladder of change, as the title talked about. Climbing that ladder, how to do it. And a lot of them want to be able to take the leap from where they are, whether it be frustration, anger, the anxiety, all of that, to a joyous, loving, perfect place, and almost want to do it in one fell swoop or one leap. And it's sometimes hard for them to realize, that's not going to happen. And if in some cases, as I work with them, especially with EFT, they'll show within even maybe a couple of weeks, they'll start feeling better. So they automatically think they're cured and then step away from it, and that doesn't work either, because there's a lot of layers to the onion of that anxiety that have to be worked through. And you may get through some and start feeling better, but there's more that might be coming, especially if you've been in something for a long time. They also don't realize how much power this issue has over them. and that it's just not that easy to be able to conquer that issue when you've been in it a long time, because a lot of times the mind will actually take on a different idea about that issue. You know, when somebody's been in an issue or an anxiety for a long time, or trauma or PTSD, any of those types of anxiety for a long time, the mind actually, in wanting to protect you, in wanting to keep you safe, realizes or thinks that, well, you know what, they've been in this PTSD or they've been in this anxiety for a long time. That must be a safe place for them because they keep in it. And so the mind will take over and say that that trauma or that anxiety or that issue is the safe place. And it'll want to keep you in that place because it believes it's a safe place. And so there's a resistance to wanting to change that, because that, to the mind, it wants to keep you safe, and the trauma, since you've been in it for so long, will keep you safe. And one of the other issues about this idea that of wanting to change quickly, you know, we live now, I call it the FedEx world, even though that's even kind of passé, where we have to have everything. You know, FedEx started out the next day, you know, and it was such a unique concept. You know, we had fax machines back at in the day, and that was so cool because you could fax something over and they'd have it right then and there. You know, FedEx could get it to you like the next day or within 2 days or whatever. So we've become this world. Now it's text, and, you know, Amazon is delivering the same day a lot of times with some of the items that they sell. We've become a world that expects instantaneous response, instantaneous results in what we do. So I tend to call it the FedEx world, but I don't even know if it's more now the Amazon world of Prime and getting it the next day or 2 days or getting it the same day. We have an expectation that things should be instantaneous, that things should happen now, and not, it's not going to take me months, it's going to take me a day or two, you know. And that just does not happen when it comes to anxiety and these tough issues. Now, EFT, which is really one of the practice that I do, I believe makes the effort so much faster. You know, in what I do, with the practice I do, I think works faster, I believe, in probably about half the time of a cognitive behavioral therapy or something like that. And I'm not against those or saying anything bad about those. I think talk therapy is wonderful. Yet what I do in the EFT speeds it up. So I love to teach other therapists how to use EFT because it can really speed up the process of what they do. But here's one of the thoughts that I believe helps people to understand how the process is of getting past long-term anxieties, long-term issues that they've had for a long time. I think an important thing to think about beyond the work of the EFT and all of that is they have to understand about, one, like I said, you can't go from a place of total anxiety and anger and things like that to a joyous, free place in one fell swoop. So it takes steps of a ladder, I call it, to slowly work yourself towards the goal of being happy, the goal of being free of this anxiety. But you can't go from having tremendous anxiety and traumas and things like that to this freeing place, again, in one big fell swoop or one big leap. So here's the thought, and this actually comes from Esther Hicks, from Abraham Hicks, which I adore. I love listening to Esther Hicks and how she does her work with the Abraham group. And she talks about this idea of And I like to call it positive direction. I don't know that that's what she calls it, but she talks about the fact of what you may have to do in in getting to that goal of that happy, free of the anxiety, is take small steps that don't look on the surface as positive, but they are in a positive direction towards that goal. So in other words, going from this total anxiety, this heavy trauma, I should say, going from that to just a lighter anxiety. From that, and then the next step going from that to a anger stage, going from that to a frustration stage, going from that to a, you know, what was I? So here's the example that I came up with. So let's say that you're livid. This is maybe about anger, and you're livid about something, so angry that you're just boiling over, and going from that to just being angry, and going from that and being mad, and going from that and being frustrated, going from that and being stressed, going from that and being emotional, and then going from that and maybe being just even-keeled, kind of neutral about it. Then going up to maybe being average about it, kind of a little bit better, happier about it, to friendly to happy. So in other words, some of those steps, like going from being lividly angry to just angry, doesn't look positive. I mean, why would you want to go towards anger? But it is a positive direction because you're changing from a really, really angry place to a not so angry place. That's a step. And that's a step a lot of times you got to take. And then, going from angry to mad, well, they're almost kind of the same, but to me, somebody's mad is not livid, and they're not like really, really angry. They're kind of mad. They're not real happy with what you just did or whatever. So on the surface, if you said, I want to just be mad, that doesn't sound real positive. But going from livid to mad might be a positive step towards that goal of happiness, towards that goal of being free of that issue. So it takes a lot of times little steps to get there. And that's what I think is the hardest thing for people to kind of comprehend, that it's going to take a while. And what I try to get people to understand is that one, that cliche-ish idea that life is a journey. Well, it is really true that it is a journey. And it's really about the in-between. It's not the end results, because that's not because even when we reach the end of, we get past one thing, there's always something else. And that's what life is really about. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. To me, when we stop having issues, or we stop questioning, or we stop looking for something new, more, increasing our knowledge, when we stop doing that, we're going to be dead. We're going to be out of this human body. So we really have to enjoy life as the process and what's involved in the journey, not the ending results. Because if you think about it, I'll give you an example for myself, is that I don't believe I could be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't taken the journey I've taken. Because I thought about it before. It's like I really enjoy the coaching and counseling work that I do, the work with EFT and working with clients and helping them get past their anxiety, whether it be a child or an adult or a family, whatever. I really enjoy that. And I've thought about it here and there. I wish that I would have done this, back when I got out of college, or back when I changed my sales career job or whatever. I wish, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I go into ministry, or why didn't I? And as I think about that, it probably would have been an okay thing to do. But at the same time, I wouldn't have the passion for it if I hadn't been through the journey of my daughter's OCD and all the 2 or 3 years of hell we went through with dealing with that OCD stuff. And I probably wouldn't have had the same passion for it if I hadn't been in sales where I dealt with people. And I love dealing with clients, and I love dealing with interactions with other people and getting out there and being in front of people. It's very important that I have all those life lessons, even including my heart attack. Because it was in those lessons that I learned the compassion, that I learned the techniques, that I learned the process, and I learned how to deal with people and where they're coming from. It's great to have all the classes and theories and ideas of school, but life experience, that process of the journey of life, is where I learned the best lessons, where I learned the most from my experience. So, life kind of gives you the pieces you need to put together the puzzle. And I don't think we ever really get the full puzzle put together in our lifetime. And that's okay, because it's not about the having a full puzzle. It's, the pieces along the way that are so important. So I really believe in this positive direction, that we have to look at these little steps and be happy and pleased and thankful and grateful for each of these steps, each of the little morsels of steps we have. And not just the positive, and not just the ones that look positive or the ones that were right, but it also those ones that were wrong, the mistakes we made along the way. Because those are our lessons. Those mistakes especially are our big lessons. It's that whole idea, and I think I talk about this in one of my previous podcasts, about the idea of contrast. It's very important that we make mistakes. It's very important that we have some things go wrong or bad, because they really make the good stand out so much better. I always use the analogy of a baseball player that gets up every time he goes to bat, every time, and hits a home run. That home run has no meaning to him anymore. It doesn't really have any joy to it anymore, because he's got nothing else to compare it to. He doesn't have the strikeout that he feels bad about, and then he comes up and hits home run after it, and he goes, wow, I can do that too. So you got to have that contrast. You got to look at each step, both good, what we rank as good or bad. I just like to look at ones that serve me and ones that don't necessarily serve me. But even the ones that so-called don't serve me in a lesson of what not to do, or serve me in a lesson of how to do it differently or better. So we really have to look at how this works in each little step along the way, and appreciate each step. So I wanted to bring this up because I think it's important in working through anxiety, that you got to understand, what caused it, and get down into that and try to resolve the messages that we have in our mind about the anxiety. That's where I work, is getting past those messages so we understand, because a lot of these messages are not correct, or they're not serving us, so we get past them. And to know and to understand that it's not going to happen overnight, that you can't take one big bold leap and change everything in your life, or change the issues or anxiety in your life. And you really don't want to, because it's the process of learning through the journey that makes it different. I recently had worked with my mentor and was doing some tapping work with her, and we were talking about how my life had gone, and how how I wanted to be. I made the statement, oh, I just sometimes want to be back to normal or back to the way I was. And I actually have a podcast about being normal and what normal means. But I made the mention that I would love to be back the way it was before my daughter, when we went through all this hell with my daughter. And she looked at me and she said, why? And I said, well, life was better then. And she said, but yeah, if you were able to go back in time and you were back to that time, you would lose all the lessons that you learned and the changes that you've become in that journey from that time to now. Why would you want to do that? You have gained so much and learned so much from what you went through with your daughter, what you went through in your life during those last 6 or 7 years, whatever it was. She said, why would you want to lose all of that? Yeah, you had some stuff that didn't serve you, but you also had a lot of stuff that has changed you and changed you for the better. And we have to look at our life like that too. So we have to learn to look at how that change, all things have changed our life. And I believe really for the better or for the moving forward. I think most all the things we do, even the stuff that doesn't turn out well, moves us forward, because when we do something wrong, hopefully we're questioning, well, what was wrong about it and how can I do it differently next time? So I think, again, it's very important to understand these things and understand that we want to enjoy the time it takes to get us into a better place. We want to enjoy the journey and what goes in the journey, not the result. So until next time, keep tapping, and I hope this has helped you out. Take care. That concludes this podcast. Please leave me a comment or question below. That gives me good direction where to go on future podcasts. I would love to hear your invisible wheelchair stories if you're willing to share it. If you would, go to invisiblewheelchair.com and click on Tell Your Story. I want to remind you that OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is treatable, and I can help you get past OCD. So if you have heard this podcast and others, and you feel like you need further assistance and would like to spend some time with me working through any issues you have, then feel free to book a session at focusedhealthyfamily.com or familyocd.com, or you can call me at 704-562-1630. I also offer $85 off initial discovery session if you mention that you heard it on this podcast. Finally, don't forget that there is a tapping recording that coincides with this podcast you may want to take advantage of. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast and will join me for the next one. Remember to keep tapping, talking, and transcending your life to new heights. Thank you, and have a great day.